Hey folks, Eric Stacklebeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. And I start with a question. What happened to all of those anti-war protesters, the pro-Palestinian crowds marching in the streets these past 2 years against Israel's supposed genocide in Gaza? I ask this because right now there is a real genocide happening in Iran. Those left-wing activists, though, are strangely silent. The Iranian regime has now murdered at least 12,000 Iranians over the past several days, and the actual number is likely much higher. Over the past 17 days, the Iranian people have taken to the streets to demand freedom from their radical Islamic oppressors after nearly 50 years of tyranny. Ayatollah Khamenei's response has been to order the mass slaughter of his own people. Countless thousands gunned down and murdered in the streets by the regime's goons. It is a massacre openly perpetrated by one of the world's most wicked regimes. Yet the world, which never hesitates to point fingers at Israel over its supposed war crimes, doesn't have much to say when it comes to Iran. No mass protests on college campuses, no marches in the streets of Europe, no fiery resolutions from the Democrat Party, and no emergency sessions at the UN. Instead, silence and a complete collapse of moral clarity. Right now, the only thing stopping the Iranian regime from completely crushing the protest is President Trump and his threat to intervene. On Tuesday, he posted on social media that the Iranian people should stand strong and that help is on the way. But the clock is ticking. The more hours that go by, the more Iranians murdered in the streets. The United States has a golden opportunity to help bring down a regime that has caused nothing but misery and mayhem in the Middle East and around the world. Folks, pray for President Trump to have wisdom and discernment as he makes this momentous decision. Also pray for the Iranian people and pray for our U.S. soldiers in the Middle East. Some of them are already withdrawing from our bases there in advance of possible Iranian retaliation to a U.S. attack. Now, all of the chaos and violence we're seeing in Iran right now is the logical outcome of radical Islam. And now that ideology is strengthening its hold right here in the West. We have this unholy alliance that I've talked about a bunch here on the live stream and on the newscast, radical Islam and the radical left joining together to bring down Judeo-Christian Western civilization. Well, we saw a test run for this back in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. The socialists, the Marxists, the communists, the left supported the Ayatollah's rise to power. And then a few months after he came to power, the left, the communists, etc., were the first ones with their heads on the chopping block. A cautionary tale for the left, but I don't think they're listening because they have gotten in bed with the Islamists in that end game, that shared end game of destroying, again, Judeo-Christian Western civilization. And now Yunus Sadeghiani is sounding the alarm for the West. He was born in Iran. He lives now in the UK, and he sees very troubling signals in what happened in his own home country, Iran, and what's happening in the West today. Take a look. Hey, big events unfolding right now in Iran to start 2026. We've got massive protests spreading to cities across Iran. Ambassador, this is a dream of a lot of us for the past 47 years, possibly an Iran without this tyrannical regime. What does this do if the Ayatollahs fall for the broader Middle East and for the world?
Well, first of all, Eric, I want to express a smaller dream, and that's actually to be here in your studio. It's just
Finally.
Absolutely immaculate.
Oh, great to have
Having
you.
been together in Jerusalem and in Washington, to be here with you in Texas is just fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of promise in the air. Yeah. The people of Iran are rising up. This is a people with a very long, brilliant history, a very rich culture and civilization, 92 million people who have been living under the boot of the mullahs who have deprived them of their freedom, who have deprived them of water and electricity in favor of funding terrorist organizations around the world, from Lebanon all the way to Venezuela. And now the people are rising up. Hopefully, they're going to get the support of everybody in the West and bring this regime down. You know, after we operated together, Israel and the United States, on Rising Lion, Midnight Hammer, we took out the nuclear weapon program that Iran had, the ballistic missile program. And people said, why didn't we continue and take out the regime? And what we answered then at the time was exactly what's happening now. The people have to rise up. The people have to express their will. And that's what they're doing now. They need our support. And let's pray that they're successful.
Yeah, for it to happen organically, as you said, Ambassador, is absolutely preferable. Hey, we had another pretty monumentous event over the weekend. Nicolas Maduro being captured. He's in shackles in New York right now. Does that, Ambassador, have some ripple effects in the Middle East at all? I mean, Iran, Hezbollah, obviously very close relationship with Maduro. And broader than that, maybe it just sends a message to the Ayatollahs that, look, you know, you're not safe.
Well, these things are not disconnected in the international arena. You know, we talk about globalization. Well, sure, you know, there are bad guys in the international arena that compare notes and operate together and work to actually undermine Western civilization. Venezuela is in that orbit together with Iran. So anything that degrades the Iranian proxies, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, or the Houthis, or whether it's a regime like a Maduro regime, any degrading of that orbit is good for humanity. It's good for the good guys.
Yeah. Give us a sense, Ambassador, of the state of play right now in Iran. Besides the protest, obviously, they're looking to rebuild their ballistic missile program, no doubt. And then Hezbollah to the north in southern Lebanon, Iran's chief proxy, also looking to rearm. How concerned are you about that right now?
Well, Iran and its proxies have all been degraded. We've been at, war against them now for 2 years.
Yeah.
We have ceasefires in effect in Lebanon, ceasefire in effect Gaza through the service of the American administration, which has done an unbelievable job to try to channel this war into a grand finale where we can move into an era of peace. But they've been degraded but haven't been defeated. And it's not clear they're not going to try and reconstitute. As a matter of fact, it's clear that they're trying to reconstitute. Yeah. So Iran wants to build this ballistic missile program. By the way, it's not just a ballistic missile program. It's an intercontinental ballistic program, which means that it's targeting the United States as well, because you don't need intercontinental if you're just targeting Europe or Israel. Right. Obviously, you need to go across the ocean. So that's always been their design, to take on Judeo-Christian civilization, Western civilization, and that's really what we're fighting against. So Iran used its resources, illegally, by the way, because it's sanctioned by the State Department of the United States. They used their income not to give it to the people of Iran, but to fund Hezbollah, for example, to the tune of about $1 billion a year, for Hezbollah to rape Lebanon, to cause much of its Christian population to have to flee, and cause such destabilization, firing missiles into our northern communities. So $1 billion a year went to Hezbollah. About $350 million a year went to Hamas. Several $100 million went to the Houthis in Yemen to destabilize there. So this is a country that's been destabilizing the entire region with designs on the world. So if the mullahs fall because the Iranian people have had enough, and they've had enough. I mean, all of that money went to these proxies instead of feeding the population. Why are these people rising up? Because they don't have electricity. They've been getting, over the past couple of months, 3 or 4 hours of electricity a day, sometimes less than that.
And as you said earlier, this is a great civilization, a proud country.
Very
this was
rich
ancient
civilization.
Persia.
Absolutely. This is ancient
Persia. And now
Persia.
barely electricity for most of the day.
Like we were talking about before, who knows? If this is successful, we have the Abraham Accords. Maybe we can have the Cyrus Accords.
Yes.
Right? Cyrus was
No
the
doubt.
king of Persia.
Of course.
Who turned to the Jewish people and said, rebuild your temple.
No doubt.
So, we can rebuild our temples together in an era of peace. And everybody can have their temples, and everybody can have their mosques, and everybody can have their churches, and we can live side by side. Not one civilization trying to destroy the other civilization, but living side by side with each civilization.
Yeah, God willing. Ambassador, great point. Iran is a Bible land, you could say. Esther, Mordecai, Cyrus, Darius, Ezra, Nehemiah, a lot of that unfolded in ancient Persia, which is modern-day Iran. I consider Israel the first line of defense for Western civilization. You could say America is the last line of defense. The leaders of both countries together in Mar-a-Lago last week, you were there with them at the table, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Can you talk about that historic meeting a little bit? You and I were talking off camera. Going in, the mainstream media in the West was saying the relationship's in tatters, there's daylight between the U.S. and Israel. Ambassador, it didn't seem that way at the meeting in Mar-a-Lago. Tell us more about it.
Well, this was actually the 6th meeting between the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and Prime Minister Netanyahu in 10 months. There's never been any kind of relationship like this. And every single time, 5 times, by the way, in the U.S., 4 in Washington, 1 in Florida, and, of course, the president's trip to Jerusalem. So 6 meetings. And then, of course, there was the visits of Secretary of State Rubio and, of course, Vice President Vance, who visited Jerusalem as well. So every meeting has been preceded by fake news about people trying to create a narrative. There's daylight, there's crisis, there's a black cat that walked in between them. Yeah. And every time we come away from the meeting with a deeper and wider relationship.
As was the run-up, by the way, to the Iran operation in June.
There's never been a collaborative effort between our 2 countries as there was in the 3 months prior to Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer. And look what we can do together, you know, and when we take the innovative genius of Israel and the power of America as the leader of the free world, and we put this together, we really, you know, architect a better future for humanity. Yeah. That's ultimately what we're interested in doing in this relationship. It's solidifying, protecting Judeo-Christian civilization. We're an extension, really, of the American dream in the Middle East. We're like the extension of Judeo-Christian civilization in the Middle East, in the world of Islam. And what's happening within Islam right now is a tension over whether or not to accommodate Judeo-Christian civilization or to combat it. So the anti-reformists, those who are opposed to changing and reforming Islam to an accommodationist, moderate mode, the first stop they're going to do is eradicate Israel. That was Iran's design, to create this ring of fire around the country, start with Israel, and then move on to the rest of Western civilization. Yeah. So, yeah, we're out there on the front. We're really in a civilizational battle. And the thing is that if the radicals fall, that means that the moderates within Islam are going to rise to the surface, and they're going to be empowered, and they're taking the approach of, let's accommodate Judeo-Christian civilization. Let's live side by side with Western civilization. And then we have a whole new world that we talk about, you know, the world that we're all praying for, where there's a world of peace and accommodation and a brotherly love, which, you know, why shouldn't we have peace with Iran? Yeah. Why shouldn't we have peace with Saudi Arabia? What is the issue? You know, really, what's the issue? Why are we constantly having to confront this state-sponsored terrorism? Why should there be proxies like Hezbollah taking over Lebanon? Why? Right. Okay? So we have to move in that direction. We have to fight terrorism as if there's no peace, and we have to make peace as if there's no terrorism. We have to keep moving ahead with the hope that one day we're going to win this battle. We have to keep our eye on the ball, though. If we let our guard down and we try to pursue agreements too soon, when terrorism is still brewing, we're going to come out shortchanged.
Yeah, speaking of which, you're a busy man. You're in Mar-a-Lago. You were in Paris recently negotiating with members of the new Syrian government. What's the status there, Ambassador? I mean, a lot of rumblings that Israel and Syria may come to some sort of agreement. Are you optimistic about that? Do you see perhaps a bright future between Israel and Syria with this new government, which, look, there's a lot of questions about this new Syrian government still. A spotty track record, to say the least, some of the officials, including the leader of Syria right now. What's your take on where this relationship could go?
We are very hopeful that it's going to go to a very good place, because the music coming out of Damascus is music that we've never heard before, which is music about living in peace with Israel. We believe, and I got to give a lot of credit here to the administration, Ambassador Tom Barak, U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, who kind of brought us together in Paris this week, who's been working very hard to make this work. And our approach is one of caution. We think we should take a little bit of a slower approach to this. We'd like to see things stabilize in Syria. There have been some troubling events. There have been some massacres of minorities, Druze, yeah, some Christians, Alawites. So we'd like to see the situation stabilize, but at the same time, we want very much to march forward to agreements. So we want to start with confidence-building measures. We want to take small steps. The meeting in Paris was good. It was hopeful. And what we agreed was to have more intensive talks. In other words, not to wait a few weeks in between talks, but actually to arrange a mechanism where we can be in constant contact. So if there are points of deconfliction that are necessary, will be there right away on the phone, talking to each other, deconflicting. It doesn't always have to be with the American representatives in the middle. We can do this directly with the Syrians. We're ready to do it, and I think the Syrians are too. We just need a little bit more time to make sure that our Druze and Christian brothers across the border are being protected. We have to make sure that our border is protected. I mean, look, after October 7th, we have a new defense strategy, and that's that we're not going to allow jihadists on our borders. We have tiny borders. We're a tiny, tiny country. You know, we're smaller than New Jersey. You know how many times we can fit into the state of Texas? we could probably fit into the area between Dallas and Fort Worth. That's the country.
Actually, very true. I believe Israel roughly the size of DFW.
Okay, so that's the situation. I remember former President Bush flew over in a helicopter, flew over Israel with former Prime Minister Sharon, and when they landed, he said, you know, I flew over Israel. That's about the size of my ranch. Okay, so we've got a country the size of a ranch in New Jersey. In Texas, we can't afford to have people who want to destroy us at our border, you know, with tens of thousands of arms. We saw what happened October 7th, and you know, it was by the grace of God and the courage of our youth who rose like lions and lionesses.
The greatest generation of Israel.
The greatest generation. We so underestimated them. We thought they're the TikTok generation, you know, the iPad generation. These kids just, you know, they took responsibility. Viktor Frankl, the great founder of logotherapy, once said that next to the Statue of Liberty, we need a statue of responsibility. And you know what Israel says to Viktor Frankl? We don't need a statue of responsibility. We need a youth to take responsibility. And these kids took responsibility, and they saved the country. So we can't rely on miracles, though. And we can't have jihadists, whether Hezbollah in the north or jihadists in, you know, on the Syrian border or Hamas. Okay, so ceasefires are good. They're important. We have to move in that direction. But we're going to be insistent that Hamas is disarmed, Gaza is demilitarized, Hezbollah is disarmed, South Lebanon is demilitarized. That's what the administration, under the leadership of President Trump, has embraced our position on that issue, and we're moving forward together with the administration to see to it that those two missions are accomplished. Disarming of terrorists and demilitarization of the areas around Israel.
All of this, including with Syria, is just smart, common sense policy, no doubt. In Gaza, Ambassador, how confident are you that Hamas will disarm willingly? That seems unlikely. Talk about phase 2 of the Gaza plan. Will Hamas lay down its arms without a nudge to do so?
It's going to take a little bit more than a nudge. There's no chance that Hamas is going to willfully lay down their arms. That's their raison d'etre. That's why they exist, to bear arms and to carry out terrorist attacks. So look, we had to deal with a situation where there were almost 400 miles of terror tunnels under an area. I mean, look, all the Gaza Strip is 24 miles long and 8 miles wide. Underneath that tiny area were almost 400 miles of tunnels. So no other country has ever had to deal with a security situation like this.
It's a giant booby trap.
Oh, it's a giant booby trap. My son was killed in one of those booby traps. Okay, right. He was killed in one of those booby traps. He was sent to find one of the shafts to one of the tunnels where they were firing missiles into our southern cities. He found it, except it was too late. They set off a booby trap and killed him together with 3 of his soldiers and injured 5 on the other side of the wall. The house came crashing down on them. But they knew, though, what they were fighting for. They were fighting for Israel and for civilization. But this is an example of what we're up against. No other countries has to face anything like this. 40,000 terrorists armed to the teeth above ground, operating in a civilian population centers, and 400 miles of terror tunnels below ground. And yet people come and say, Israel, too much collateral damage, you know, we didn't starve anybody, we didn't create any genocide, it's all a big lie, it's a big blood libel. We conducted this war and came up with collateral damage similar to the collateral damage in America's fight in Mosul. We protected the enemy population as best we could. We tried to avoid collateral damage, much to the expense of our own soldiers sometimes. So we're gonna push back against this blood libel. And God bless you and TBN that has been on the mark about this and have not taken on this, you know, a fake news line of Israel creating war crimes and the Prime Minister being guilty. Prime Minister is guilty of one thing: protecting his people, protecting Israel, protecting Western civilization and fighting terrorism, and that's not guilty. That's an honorary position to hold.
Yeah. We talked earlier about Western civilization. It was really born on Mount Sinai 3,500 years ago with a man named Moses, a Jewish man named Moses, spread to Jerusalem, then spread throughout the world. And yet, Ambassador, today we have the radical left, radical Islam, we expect, sadly. But on the right now, we have this phenomenon of people saying, well, we don't need Israel. Maybe Qatar is a better ally than Israel, and Israel's a problem. How do you respond to that? It's coming from an unlikely quarter, I guess you would say, a small but vocal chunk of the conservative movement now saying we should abandon Israel.
Yeah, I don't think they're conservative.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, they do, that small group does the conservative movement a terrible injustice to even call themselves conservative. There's a horseshoe theory where extremes actually meet and are closer to each other than the center that divides them. It's the horseshoe theory. So you take a fascist regime and a communist regime, and they're both totalitarian. And they both reject liberalism in the center. So, I mean, people saying that, you know, Qatar is a better ally than Israel. Look, you want to be an ally of Qatar, that's, you know, it's your business. Talking about spending billions and billions of dollars in the United States, I mean, and controlling education and so on. I mean, it's something you might want to look into. I often say about the Qataris, you know, they're great at funding the fire department and the arsonists at the same time. I mean, they've been funding Muslim Brotherhood operations around the world. But that interests me much less than the relationship that Israel has with the United States. I'm going to Lockheed Martin tomorrow. One of your neighbors right here, okay? We fly the F-35s more than all the countries that are in the F-35 partnership combined. The hours that our pilots, the experience of our pilots that send back to Lockheed Martin in order to approve the aircraft is worth billions and billions of dollars. Nobody else could provide the United States with that kind of experience and knowledge. And we do so because we're partners, because we're in the same boat. We're in the same cockpit, okay? We're flying the same plane for the same target and for the same interest. When people said, you know, I love this. We talked about before the meetings between Prime Minister and President Trump. And I heard some you know, people in this element who say that the Prime Minister dragged the president into this war with Iran. You know, did anybody listen to President? Is President Trump somebody that's dragged into a war? I mean, nobody
He's got a pretty strong will.
Nobody drags President Trump into anything. And the Prime Minister didn't even try to drag. The Prime Minister said, look, this is an existential issue for us. Yeah. If you choose that it's an existential issue for you as well, we're happy for you to go in it with us. But we're going to do this because this is existential. Yeah. Iran wants to destroy us, and we're not going to be destroyed. The difference between the anti-Semitism that the Jewish people faced for 2,000 years and what we face now, there's one difference. It's not that the hatred has gone away. It's that now the state of Israel allows the Jewish people to defend itself and not to be subject to those who want to send them into the ovens of Auschwitz. We don't go into the ovens of Auschwitz anymore. We have our Air Force, we have our Army, we have a generation of young Jews who take responsibility, the best generation we've ever had. And thank God we have a partnership with the United States where we can purchase your F-35s, man them with our pilots, and together there's no better combination. Yeah. And I'll tell you, it goes beyond that. If you take a look at the map of the United States, there is not a state in which our industries are not intimately involved with job creation right here. You know, if you take away the financial military assistance that we've received from the United States, you talk about 1 million jobs, about 1 million jobs. And the return on the dollar, you know, the former chief of the Air Force once said that without Israel, he'd need 5 CIAs.
That is right.
That's about $75 billion right there, okay? So we want to actually move into even greater collaboration, into greater partnership. We're moving into a super hyper technological age. We've got to do this together. We've got to develop AI together because our common enemies out there are trying to move ahead of us on all of that. And if we put our energies together, we're going to be ahead of all those who are interested in putting us down.
Yeah, Ambassador, great breakdown. Big takeaway just listening. Peace through strength always works, historically and today. Hey, last question. At that Mar-a-Lago meeting, Prime Minister Netanyahu made some very powerful remarks about the Christian communities worldwide, places like Nigeria, and said that Israel would advocate for persecuted Christians around the world. I think a lot of people were really heartened by that. Can you tell us a bit more about his thinking there?
Thinking is very clear. Look, when Christians are persecuted in Syria, in Lebanon, we're there. And Israel has insisted on free access and free service of all religions in the Old City, all the churches, which was not the case prior to Israel. No. Unfortunately, since we signed the Oslo Accords and left control of Bethlehem, the Christian community has fled Bethlehem. Yeah. We get blamed, and people don't know the nuances. People don't understand that we're out of Bethlehem for 30 years. It's the Palestinian Authority that's driven them out.
That's completely flipped.
So look, we are part of the same civilization. Yeah. We have to defend each other. Often people don't understand when I have the privilege of giving a sermon in a church. Yeah. And I tell the parishioners, as an Orthodox Jew, when I see a parking lot outside the church full on a Sunday morning, when everybody could be golfing, I'm thrilled. When I see Christmas lights during the Christmas holiday and I hear the Christmas hymns, I'm thrilled. And there's much more that unites us than divides us. And the fact of the matter is that if you believe that there's an architect of history and there's an arbiter of destiny, that there's that hidden hand that's at work in our lives, that's what's most important. Israel is a fulfillment of prophecies that either you take them seriously or you don't. And if you take them seriously, you say, wow, I don't understand everything that the architect of history is doing, but I'm awestruck by it. Yeah. And this is kind of awestruck. There isn't a precedent for a people returning to their homeland after 2,000 years of dispersion. There just isn't a precedent for that, of reinstating the biblical language, of turning the biblical language into daily parlance, of teaching little children the Hebrew of the Bible. So something's going on here. And one last thought, if you'll permit me, if we have another minute. You mentioned Moses and Sinai. I'm going to take us back even a little further, right to the very beginning. And even before Abraham, let's go to Adam. And even before Adam, creation. What is creation? Creation is discernment. God discerns. He discerns between heaven and earth, between the firmament and the waters, between each day of creation, between levels of creation, between 6 days of the week and the Sabbath. And when he creates man in his image, he says, you got to do one thing, got to be like me. Discern. There's these trees in the garden. Discern between one and all the rest. And what's been our challenge now since creation? Discernment. Today, people have lost the ability to discern. They don't discern between Hamas and Israel, get all confused, between good and evil, between true and false, between fake news and real news. We got to go back to discernment. And one of the things that Israel projects is discernment. That is what makes us in God's image, the ability to discern. So we have to go back to do that. And God bless you that your reporting and your focus on the news is one of discernment.
Great insights there by Yunus. Folks, he is a brave Iranian dissident. Please follow him, X, Instagram, across social media. If you like what you're hearing, interviews like that, commentary like this, it's current events, breaking news, mainly from Israel and the Middle East, but we go around the world, Venezuela, Russia, China, Europe, the U.S., and beyond, depending on the news cycle. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We'd love to have you here. We come to you from an unapologetically biblical perspective, by the way, and we would love to have you here with us every day, shoulder to shoulder, as watchmen and women on the wall for such a time as this. Again, lift the people of Iran up in prayer right now. What a courageous people. And look, 12,000 is the number a lot of people are putting forth in terms of how many have been killed. Other reports are saying, and credible reports, that it may be more like 20,000 people murdered in the streets in a very short span. And folks, we have reports of bodies piled up in the streets of Tehran and other cities. What you have here is a demonic regime. And Ayatollah Khamenei seems to have made a decision. If he's going down, he's going to take the Iranian people with him. So that's where we're at right now. And President Trump, look, he's made all the right moves in the Middle East, in my view, especially when it comes to Iran. Go back to his first term, eliminating Iranian terror master Qasem Soleimani, pulling out of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal, designating Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization. Fast forward to this term, the big one, Operation Midnight Hammer, destroying Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. Without Donald Trump, the Iranian regime is not teetering on the brink like it is right now. And now he has, I think, his most fateful decision. He can give the push to send this regime over the cliff and into the ash heap of history for good, where it belongs. So again, pray for wisdom for him. Pray for the Iranian people. We live in Bible times, and you've got a front row seat here on the Watchman Newscast. Thanks so much for joining us. God bless you, and until next time, remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.